Welcome to Tent Talk, a show on the Wilderness Locals channel where we chat conservation and everything surrounding it. These are our opinions, and we're going to touch on some controversial topics to get the conversations going. It's a space for casual discussions that many of us tend to have on the mountain anyway. We're open to feedback and dialogue from all. On today's podcast, we have two guests on separately. We're going to chat about the ministry's proposal for a full LEH of Region 4 bighorn hunting. Dylan Forsyth from the Out Valley joins me first to chat his time and experience with these sheep, followed by Kyle Southgate out of Cranbrook, who has spent a lifetime in the area and also dedicates a ton of his time to being with these special animals.
I just wanted to open up with just a bit of background, just who you are and the time you've spent in the Kootenays and how familiar you are with the bighorns out there. If you just give us a bit of a background.
So I've been in the valley for about 16 years now. I've been pretty active in the local conservation clubs between the Elk River Blood and Gun Club, and then collaborating on a bunch of stuff with the Sparwood and District Fish and Wildlife Association. Also a board director on the East Kootenay Wildlife Association. That's part default position based on my presidency position in the Elk River Rod and Gun Club. Try to be active in the BC Wildlife Federation because of that, and then also try to be active with the Wild Sheep Society.
So you're just in the mix with all of it then, hey?
Yeah, it seems like it goes hand in hand. You start getting involved with one and it kind of snowballs from there, especially when it's something that you take an interest in, even when it seems like I'm pretty busy on schedule, but it's something I want to try and at least make some time for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've spent a fair amount of time chasing bighorns out in the Kootenays?
I try, never enough it seems, but yeah, on occasion I try to carve out a little bit of time to actually go for a hike or two.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to make that time sometimes. I'm lucky I don't have kids or anything yet, so I'm able to usually make a bit more time. But I know I'm talking to all my buddies that have kids. It's like, how do you get out so much? It's like, well, it's a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what we were going to talk about today is, I'm sure a lot of the guys who are Wild Sheep Society members and all that saw recently the engagement survey and what's being proposed from the ministry in terms of a full LEH for Region 4 bighorn. And, I saw your post and multiple other people's posts, and LEH is something that gets talked about a lot in terms of the answer to diminishing populations. And I think you and I are on the same page, and quite a few others, when we can say that LEH, I don't think, is the answer to all of our problems. I don't know if you want to touch on that and what you've seen so far in terms of, I don't know how much time you spent in Mount Assiniboine or even since Bull River has gone to full LEH. But I don't know if do you agree with that LEH generally isn't always going to be the answer to our problems?
Yeah, no, I definitely believe it's not the answer to our problems here. There is a time and place for LEH, but this isn't it. LEH would be a last ditch resort, for very specific target things. And this isn't going to solve any of our problems when it comes to certain populations in the region, general diminishing populations. I mean, we're not hunting ewes, we're not hunting lambs, we're not hunting class 1, class 2 rams, and yet we're seeing downtrends in some of these populations across the board like that. So restricting hunter harvest, that's a scratch on the surface to major issues, if it is even going to actually have any sort of real benefit. In the meantime, it's going to be a lot of detriment to hunter opportunity, and then too, you're taking the individuals off the landscape that are most passionate about it. I mean, a lot of the guys that are so involved with the Sheep Society, with these different conservation groups, they're guys that get to go and do this. And I mean, that's part of the reason, because they get to do it every year and they want to be able to continue to do it every year. All of a sudden, if this goes to LEH, a lot of these zones, you'll be lucky if you get one draw in your lifetime. And there's still going to be a lot of guys with a lot of passion for it, but it takes the wind out of your sails quite a bit. If all of a sudden those places you go to enjoy and opportunities you get to pursue it, if they also become non-existent, you might see a major shift in people's focus. And one of the things that it's not being considered at all right now. So LEH is definitely not going to be our solution. It is one way for the ministry to show that they're trying to do something on, when there are major problems. But I think there's a lot better focuses that we can start on before we pull this lever.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I had one last question at the end that I was going to ask you, actually, and you hit on it right there. One of the biggest factors I see is we're hunter conservationists, right? And I was going to ask what your opinion would be in terms of, as soon as you take that opportunity away from guys and, the guys want to put their dollars into it and they care about the animals, but there is also the side that we want to be able to hunt these animals as well. So you take that away, and I don't know what kind of effect you might see from hunter conservationists on that, just because we're kind of picking up the slack where I feel the ministry is maybe not taking care of a lot of the problems. And as volunteers, we're putting our dollars and our money in to better help these herds. So with less opportunity and less ability to spend time, and, hunting's a pretty intimate thing when we're chasing sheep, I feel like. And without that ability, I think it might unfortunately have a little bit of a negative effect on like volunteer conservation a little bit too. It
absolutely will. When it comes to 95% of guys that are out there pursuing sheep, they're not out there, with the full intent on filling the tag. We all know that odds on it are not that great, but it's still that opportunity to be able to do it. I mean, not to say that, hunters are not going to still be heavily involved in conservation efforts of it, because we'd want to see it come back. Some point we want to care about, we care about these herds regardless. I mean, perfect example, you look at the work that's being done up by Golden. I mean, that's a herd that's not huntable. And I don't believe it ever has been in the last 50, 80 years, whatever it is. But I mean, yet you still have conservation groups up there, hunter conservation groups that are actively working on a program. I believe it's collaring, habitat assessment, and that's on a herd that's not huntable. So there's a perfect example of, we're still going to be trying to do the work regardless, but it will take the wind out of some of those efforts. It's an unfortunate reality.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're doing all the work and then we're still getting punished for something that is really just a scapegoat as to bigger problems, I think.
Yeah, and another perfect example, between the Sparwood District Fish and Wildlife Association and the Elk Rod Men Club, we collaborated and have been the drivers for a 5-year Elk Valley West collaring and habitat assessment plan that it's in year 2. It's halfway through year 2. And I mean, we're talking about several $100,000 that's being driven by 2 clubs, and that's the sort of work that, in all reality, the ministry should be doing. But you have groups and people that are that invested in the species and these herds that were willing to do that sort of stuff, to get that data, to put it in the hands of wildlife managers. And I don't want to point the finger at wildlife managers and say it's all their fault and they don't want to do their job. I do believe that we have some fantastic wildlife managers. I do also believe that some of them are very handcuffed by lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of opportunity. And when they don't have this data, when they don't have the ability and the resources and the staffing to be able to go out and get all this data, sometimes they have to look at these alternatives. And, they may look at it without fully understanding all the consequences. And that's where public input right now is very important, to let them know that there's going to be a lot of repercussions that maybe they don't see because of, the possibility of LEH. It is something that I think if we can, as hunter conservationists, if we can push our MLAs, our elected officials, government, to get more funding, to get them to be able to do their job more effectively, get them to do the data, and have real science-based management practices implemented, that's going to be our big solution right there. But that's a big push. That's a big ask, but I think that's what we need to do.
I totally agree. And it's just constantly pushing for that advocating. But I mean, touching on what you said there with just the funding and how wildlife managers are kind of handcuffed, like totally. We saw it. I saw it this year big time down here in the Lower Mainland when we were doing the goat count, and they had funding for an aerial survey we're supposed to for this year that just got pulled from them like last minute. And there's not much that as a wildlife manager they can do. So it's not always their fault, but I think it stems from up above that too, unfortunately, which is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So
one of the other things that's kind of been presented is other options. Like what as hunter conservationists, when we're trying to give some feedback and have some buy-in, presenting other options or more viable options to an LEH. I mean, I'm sure you saw with WSSBC, they put out the survey that they did. I guess it was probably about a week ago. The last October 15th was when all the answers had to be in by. And I'll just go over the 5 options that were on there. Was a 1 ram in every 3 years. So if you take a ram, you have to wait 3 years before taking another. There's a 1 in 5. So same type of thing, but 5 years. There was the option for a separate bighorn and thinhorn tag, which every year you would have to pick one or the other. And then the bridge of the nose rule, which we've seen in Region 3 for Rockies, and a reduced season length. I mean, those are just some of the options that were presented, but I don't know if you've had conversation with anyone else on what other options might be better, more viable for that population of Rocky Mountains out in there in the Kootenays.
Yeah, trust me, I've been in a lot of conversations with a lot of individuals on this, and I actually even reached out to Kyle Stelter shortly after they put that out, just to speak with him in person on all these proposals. I guess first thing I want to point out before we even get to talking about that is, as soon as the idea of LEH came out, hunters were jumping over themselves to say, okay, well, here's other ways in which we can limit ourselves, for the sake of this. That was their first reaction was, okay, well, you know what, we're willing to limit ourselves, maybe not with LEH, but here's all sorts of alternatives and options. And that's a testament in itself to, a sheep hunter's willingness to do what's right for the species if need be. But I'd really like to make a strong stress point that we should be taking some of that focus and some of that energy and redirecting it to management officials, to our governing bodies, and say, hey, look, we're willing to, but we need to see the commitment from them first, and that they've exploited all their resources and opportunities to actually manage wildlife and habitat before we start just managing people.
Yep.
And, so when it comes to those alternatives, yeah, we can talk about that, but we need to have conversation 10 times as large on what's going to be done as an actual scrutinized management plan for not only the wildlife, but then also habitat, so that we don't have to look at these sort of limiting opportunities.
Yep.
So that's one of my big rants, for lack of better word, on what approach that hunters should take. Is we can talk about these alternatives, but we should also be reaching out to our MLAs, writing letters, putting in our input, through different avenues, through the BC Wildlife Federation, through the Wild Sheep Society, and really, really pushing for that. So, but when we get back to these other limiting options, up north, we did see that 1 in 3 rule, I believe it was, for thinhorns quite a while ago.
Yep.
I'm not too sure on how well that, and effective that was, but talking with some different individuals that have actually analyzed the data, it appears that, there's not enough hunters that are actually taking rams year after year after year to really make a difference.
Yep.
So they're basically saying it's a wash when it comes to a solution. It's not really going to be of any sort of benefit. That remains to be seen. I mean, it's still something that could be tried. Absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to separating bighorn versus thinhorn, again, it's another way to limit potential hunter opportunity. It will alleviate some pressure. But again, I don't know if it's going to be enough to actually have any sort of real effect. The bridge of the nose option, that will still get people out, still get them, give full opportunity. But, when you look at areas like Alberta where, they talk about going from 3/4 to full curl, and there's a lot of resistance on that because there are a lot of rams that don't even make the full curl designation, let alone a bridge of the nose designation. So you've got, you're really, you're limiting that opportunity in certain ways. It's got its pros and cons. I don't know if it's going to be a real solution for around here or not. And then I guess when it comes to shortening the season, to my understanding anyways, like there's 12 metapopulations within region 4 that have been categorized. And out of the huntable ones, I believe there's really only 1 or 2, ones that are adjacent to no hunting areas that shortening the season would even have really an effect on, the Elk Valley is one of them, potentially I believe Radium, but I'm not too familiar with that herd. But in all reality, those herds are not having issues with low class 3, class 4 ram counts. They still hold those mature rams. And so shortening the season really is just going to condense the pressure. I don't believe it's actually going to have any sort of, it'll have minor effect on harvest, but the herds where we are seeing lower class 4 ram numbers, those ones shortening the season isn't going to have a major effect on them. Those rams are always there. We're just going to have, concentrated hunting pressure. So, they're all ideas that can be explored, and I'm sure they can be, looked at and scrutinized a little bit more. But again, I don't think that's where our primary focus of energy should be. It should be on what are we going to do to make these populations healthy again. Let's manage wildlife. Let's manage habitat, not just restrict people.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, just because I'm not overly familiar with the sheep out in Region 4, how big of an effect does predation play on sheep out there?
And that's predation is always a hot topic. Obviously, it is a major, it is something, and there's a lot of variety of predators. We do have decent grizzly bear and black bear count. We've got a decent number of cougars. The wolves are doing fairly well. They have to eat, and if you get a sheep cat that specializes in wintering range sheep, that can have a pretty major effect fairly quickly. Predation, there's it is definitely something that has to be looked at, and how it's going to be managed as well. All these resources, they do have to be managed. And it is something that, quite honestly, maybe there should be more effort in understanding the data involved with them as well, just to see how much predation is an issue here. There's quite a wide range of opinions on it, but we keep talking about science-based management. Maybe we should be looking a lot more at really knowing the numbers on that sort of stuff, so we can really end the debate and actually go forward with solutions.
Absolutely. I think when we talk about science and we talk about harvest and these animals, I think one of the real important things that really needs to get driven into people is I was looking at one of the write-ups today, and the average age of Region 4 bighorns being taken is over 8. It's 8.2 years old, which I'd say is higher than anywhere else in the province for bighorns. If I had to guess, I'm waiting on confirmation across Region 3 and 5 as to what the average age is, but based on my experience,
I can pretty confidently assume that is correct.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what the average, I'm trying to get the average like the most up-to-date averages on stone sheep as well, but I'd say that's pretty similar to what stone sheep will be as well, if not maybe even a little bit higher over the last couple of years, but who knows? I'll need to get all that up-to-date information before I start putting numbers out there. But I received that and I was like, wow, I'm like, as a hunter, I feel like that's pretty responsible age of sheep to be taken.
Yeah, and part of the LEH, push is the idea that, they're a potential concern of harvest of, the 6 and 7 year old ram.
Yep.
Or, these rams making it to that class 4 category. But I honestly don't feel that we're at the point where we need to, have the fire sale and put the brakes on completely on hunting opportunity. We've got a lot more steps in between before we ever get to this point. I guess a couple of the other issues, when the Bull River went to LEH, then you would start getting these ripple effects where a lot of that pressure that was distributed more to 422, all of a sudden you see that pressure shift to the 402, 401, 423 regions. And then you get that increased hunting pressure in other areas, more guys that might have hunted the Bull River. All of a sudden they're putting more pressure up north and it just kind of ripples. And then you get this cascading effect, and if we get an LEH, trial period or whatever, if it gets implemented here, we're going to be looking at the, other regional managers saying, well, hey, maybe we should be trying it in other regions, and that's a realistic concern. It could spread to other current over-the-counter general open season areas, as like, hey, they're doing it in region 4, maybe we'll look at doing it in other regions.
Yeah.
So, this is something right now. Yeah, it has to be, I believe we have to, really let it be known that we're not in favor of this. We do have a few small populations around here that, between Mount Assiniboine, Phillips Peak, Salmo, they've been on draw for years and years. And I mean, those populations are dwindling still. We're talking about populations that, if LEH worked, if that was the be all end all, they'd be bursting with big populations and good rams, but they're not. They're going the wrong way.
Absolutely. And I mean, those are populations too, like especially Mount Assiniboine, where it's not like they see a lot of other hunter pressure from other species or anything. It's pretty a remote area, pretty tough to get into. I mean, there's obviously other reasons that those populations are declining. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's so like I said, I guess to summarize it all, yes, we are going to be the first to, say if we need to be limited, if the data says, hunting is a real concern, or, especially for certain aspects of a herd, then yeah, we're willing to make that sacrifice. But I think our energy and focus needs to be in the right place. And I think that is in urging for more funding, better management opportunities, get that focus on managing wildlife and habitat before we just start limiting ourselves, and then if there is cases in which, LEH is going to be something that, might actually be a short-term solution, we need a real plan on how it's going to come back off of LEH back to a general open season.
Yeah, and like we were talking about before, the commitment from the ministry to address all those other issues as well at the same time.
Exactly. It's got to be one of the big terms that has been used a lot the last few years is cumulative effects. Like there's not one. We don't have one issue. We have multiple issues, all causing, all contributing to it. So let's take a look at all the contributing factors to see where our best bang for the buck is. Start focusing on on those opportunities before we just pinpoint one, another catchphrase, pulling the easy lever. It's really easy to just change the regulations and say, at least something's being done.
Yeah, I think it's always one of those things that it's always easiest to point the finger at hunters sometimes and try and reduce hunter opportunity. And as I don't know the way to put it, for the ministry to put it to the public, or just the easiest place to point their finger and say, start there, right? Because it's 2021 and we know how a lot of the public's view is of hunting, and we're really the only ones that are going to fight for it, right? No one else is going to fight our battles or really even care. So.
Exactly. That's the unfortunate reality. We're only making up, I'm guessing maybe 3-4% of the population at most here in BC. So to have a pretty strong voice, to have any sort of opportunity to actually getting noticed and getting real change.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dylan, I know you got to run, so I really appreciate you coming on and giving some time for this. So.
Yeah, no, glad you're helping to lead the conversation and get people involved with that.
That was the first segment of today's episode. Next is my chat with Kyle. We have a more casual conversation to discuss the topics at hand. Enjoy. So Kyle, welcome to Tent Talk. This is going to be a part of episode number 2. Like we've talked about, it's going to be a multi-part series where we talk to a couple different individuals about the same topic. Unfortunately, we couldn't line up the timing with scheduling, so we're going to do it this way. Give us a little bit of a background. We're going to be talking about Region 4 Bighorn specifically. Give us a little bit of background with you coming up in the sheep hunting community, the hunter conservationist community in Region 4, and kind of, all about you in Region 4 and your time spent out there.
Okay. Hey, thanks for having us, guys. For me, it's a pleasure to do the first one, and now I'm back again, I guess. I never, like a lot of guys, I never got to have an older presence with sheep hunting. I kind of got into it with myself. My dad never sheep hunted. My stepdad never sheep hunted. Friends of family did. And then it was just buddies, right? Like you just kind of get into it in your early 20s is when I got into it. Back in the day, we still seen pretty healthy sheep numbers. It took me, I told Ty, 7 years to kill a bighorn. Should it have? Probably not. I made some calls on rounds that probably should have harvested because I wasn't sure. But anyways, it ended up working out good for me in the end. But I think different areas right now are different scenarios, right? Like the LEH in some zones and other zones aren't. And the numbers in some zones are good. Some seem bad. So I think it's just a matter of differentiating each zone and figure out what each zone needs to produce better numbers for the next coming years, I guess.
Yeah. And so you've been involved with WSSBC in the past and different conservation organizations out in Region 4 as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were on the board for a little bit, WSBC, and you're one of those guys that has spent tons of time around sheep out there. So what we're going to talk about today, and like I talked about previously, is this new ministry proposal to put all of Region 4 Rocky Mountain bighorn hunting to an LEH. Which over the past couple of years, we've seen different areas within Region 4 get put to an LEH, but now it's a full region-wide proposal. So I wanted to bring you on here and chat about it and chat about what your opinion is on it and what might be a little bit of a better option. And I want to start with, your opinion. Obviously they're proposing this because we're seeing these populations of sheep in a decline, and they have been in a decline in certain portions of the region for a few years now. And I personally think that hunting is being used as a little bit of a scapegoat for some of the bigger issues that might be at hand in these specific areas. And we'll talk about certain examples in a little bit, but I wanted to see what you thought about that. Just right off the top, are you for against LEH for bighorns, or do you think there's better options than going to a full LEH?
I'm 100% against it. I know the past few regions here that we've had previous, like the Phillips Creek draw, Salmo draw, Mount Assiniboine, I don't think it's done anything for them. Like back in the day, Phillips Creek that whole Galton range had such an awesome sheep herd, and it wasn't hunting that wrecked it. Whether I think they got Moby a long time ago. I don't want to say positive for sure, but pretty sure there was a disease that wiped that herd out like long time ago. Rebound, come back, predation's huge, mismanagement of resources like wintering ranges, transition areas. It's a mess in there. Now Salmo, let's touch on that one. How I don't understand how that herd doesn't flourish, because they give out limited tags. It's really hard access area to hunt. It'd be nice to see how many sheep get hit on the highway there, how many sheep get killed by cats, predation from other animals. Like why, if LEH was the go-to answer, how come that Salmo for sure didn't flourish? How come that Salmo herd is now almost gone and they've shut that season down?
Yeah.
Now look at the Assiniboine is the exact same way.
Perfect.
They did that study 2 years ago. The sheep numbers are way down. Great habitat. Why? Not from overhunting. I mean, you can't shoot ewes and lambs. So why are we not getting that lamb recruitment in these LEH zones where they figured they should?
Right. Yeah, I think Assiniboine I talked about it before, but Assiniboine is a great example where limited access, limited hunter participation, that draws, I believe, probably close to 10 years it's been in place now. Yeah. Off the top of my head. And I think I read when that draw went into place, they thought that herd to be around 90 animals. And I think it's down around 40 now. So there's a clear example where LEH clearly wasn't the answer for any sort of benefit to that herd. And not to mention that I don't think there's a whole lot of hunter pressure in terms of other species in that area either. I don't think that's it.
No, I agree with you there, Jeff. I don't think Assiniboine is that one.
Yeah.
But like Phillips Creek and the Salmo one, definitely they got huge predation issues, and then Salmo obviously with the highway. But how do you where can you get that info to find out?
Yeah,
how many sheep actually get hit on the highway there, right? And I'd like to know the success rate on that Salmo tag. Horn curl restricts itself. It manages the males as it is. If you go into, say, 422, and let's use Elko, for example, because that's the one that's on LEH right now. If there's legit 2 legal rams in that whole band of 25 to 30 rams that they figure that's there, or however many, you can't kill anymore. You can kill 2. That's it, right? Yeah. I get the whole point where they're talking hunter opportunity with now there's not going to be 20 people chasing them 2 rams. Okay. But when it's an LEH tag and somebody draws that tag, there's 20 people helping, 10 people or 15 people. So the whole social pressure and pressure on the sheep is still there because there's still just as many people looking.
Yeah.
To help these people that have these tags. But how come that lamb recruitment is not going up?
Exactly.
Elko, highway, predation, shitty wintering range, right there. that's the 3 reasons why.
Yep.
Bull River's no different, minus it doesn't have the highway.
Exactly.
Predation and shitty wintering range. I'd like to see what the numbers are in Bull River. If they've started to come up at all. But
Bull River, I want to say that draw has been 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
Right. And you've participated a little bit on that tag. Your experience prior to, let's say, 3 years ago, have you noticed a difference in sheep population out there? Have you, what's your opinion been from what you've seen?
I feel like that sheep population has come up. I don't hunt it anymore, but I do go out in the wintering range, take pictures of sheep with the wife and that. And it seems like I feel like that population has come up this year, especially. We've seen a lot more, lambs that made it through the spring and the summer and the fall. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this winter. I would say the Elko population has definitely come up, but Elko is a tough one. The way that Irene explained it to me, that it's hard to get a good number because there's so much timber, the highway, so much sheep live on the highway. You got sheep that live in the rock cuts. You got sheep that live at the mill that they don't count for. There's so many factors there. But I know last year when Buddy had that tag, we've seen a lot of sheep in 1-2 days, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. I know with my time out there, I obviously don't have the same amount of time as you, but there's a pretty decent population of sheep out there. And it was interesting with that draw. So one of the other things going on with that is you and I have talked about horn curl requirements and what it does for age class and what it could possibly do for age class, right? I think it's one of those things that gets talked about quite a bit, is whether some of these horn curl requirements have a positive or a negative effect sometimes on what I would call like the average age of harvest in certain areas. And we've seen areas in BC that have different horn curl requirements, and it seems like that average age of harvest has dropped down a little bit because of that. That could be to a multitude of factors, but we saw a horn curl requirement as an option that WSSBC provided to the ministry, or back to the ministry on that survey, and that was to go the bridge of the nose, rather than the full curl where it meets the eye, to go the bridge of the nose. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I personally, I don't know. I don't think I've seen very many sheep in Region 4 that would, and I'm talking like over the,
Bridge of the nose, yeah.
I want to say 10, 15 years of sheep hunting. Mine's close to the bridge of the nose, but he's not to the bridge of the nose. Like, I don't even honestly think I've ever seen, maybe up the valley, but around here, like, I don't know if you get that. I don't know if these sheep just broom off before then or what, but I think, like, just back up to the horn restriction there, I think, and tied in with the LEH, that if a sheep hunter, like a traditional sheep hunter, like me, you, or anybody else that hunts sheep, draws that tag, they're not going to go up there and just shoot a legal 6-year-old horn curl, legal on curl, right? They're going to try and harvest the most mature legal ram that they find. Now, somebody that doesn't hunt sheep, that just kind of draws that tag, doesn't really have the education, chances are they're just going to shoot the first legal ram that they see, whether it's a 5-year-old legal bighorn, 6, 7, 8, 10, you know what I mean? At least sheep hunters have that mindset to harvest the most mature ram there. Maybe not the biggest, but the most mature, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that goes for, like, it wouldn't hurt me one bit to see them get rid of a horn curl restriction and go straight age.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about that before. Yep. We both are on that same page.
I just think that if they were to do that, they have to pump up the education on aging sheep, right? Like, bighorns are a lot harder to age than a stone. Same thing with the desert, right? They're just harder to age. I mean, obviously you can do it. People do it all the time, but for the regular Joe Blow that's going to draw this tag, it's harder. You know what you're looking for. So test, what do they got to do for courses? I don't know. Something has to be done on the education end of it to make sure that, for one, you're not going to get a legal harvest, because if you shoot a sheep and it's short or it's 7 years old, something's got to happen.
Absolutely. There's got to be stiffer penalties, I think, than what we're seeing right now as well. There's got to be, I think with some of the penalties we're seeing right now, people don't even consider it when they're making the decision whether or not they're pulling a trigger or not. One of the things I'm going to note, I noted it with Dylan, but I'm going to say it again here because I think it's super important. Just with Region 4, the average age of harvest is over 8 years old on bighorns out there. So it's not like one of the issues we're seeing with hunting of these Rockies is a low age class of sheep. I mean, just over 8 years old, that's going to be similar to what I think our stones would be right now. And I think that's higher than average age harvest of bighorns in other parts of the province, in my opinion. I haven't seen the most recent up-to-date number on other parts, but from what I know in talking with biologists and others, that does sit a little bit higher than a lot of the rest of the province, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think you'll see it lots too, hunting where you hunt the different genetics in sheep, right? Like, some sheep just physically aren't going to grow up bridge of the nose. Some sheep around, like, especially in that 422 zone, they could be 8 years old, 9 years old, and they're not even eyeline legal.
Yeah.
Just genetics, right? So
they've still got their lamb tips.
And they still have the ram tips. Like I got a picture of a ram on my wall right now beside my kitchen. He's 8 years old and he's probably 3 inches short and he's still got his lamb tips. Like he's just never going to be there. Now you get a guy that has that tag and he's got a 9-10-year-old double broomed ram that ain't going to be there on curl. But that's obviously the ram to take, right? Because you're not going to hurt. But now you can't harvest that ram because he's not there on curl. But there's a 6 or 7-year-old ram that's legal on curl. He's going to harvest them, and that ram is in his prime breeding age. That ram's going to be doing all the, and now he's not, right?
Exactly.
That's why I think if they're going to do anything drastic, get rid of that horn curl and just go straight age. And then you gotta pass. You gotta have some education on aging sheep.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. Let's talk about some of the other options that were provided. And this is just what WSSBC put together. And we know WSSBC does quite a bit of work in the province and they're really pushing back on it. But we're going to go through the other 4 options. The first being a 1 in 3. So you take a ram, it's 3 years before you can take another. The next option was a 1 in 5, similar to that. Instead of 3 years, though, it's going to be 5. The next option was doing a separate bighorn and thinhorn tag, and you can only pick one for the year. So prior to the season, you'd be choosing whether you're going to hunt Rockies, Callies, or you're going to be hunting Stones or Dolls. Obviously, I don't know how that would work with LEH, but it's going to be one or the other. It's going to make people think ahead of the season, that's for sure, right? And then Bridge of the Nose we just talked about. And then the last one was a reduced season length out in Region 4. I know in other parts of the province, the season does run a little bit shorter than Region 4. Like where I hunt, we only get till October 20th. So there's that 5-day period that we're actually in right now where you can still hunt sheep till October 25th on GOS in a lot of the parts of Region 4. What's your opinion on that? Whether or not reducing that or bringing that date back would have any sort of effect on harvest?
So I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was definitely 10 years ago. Chunks of 402 were closed. Broadwood was closed October 20th. And then ministry changed that to be open on the 25th, because I know you can hunt one side of the highway to the 20th and then the other side of the highway to the 25th. Now you can hunt both sides, right? So the ministry changed that. They already had it. Why did they change it back?
Yeah.
Opportunity from the feds. I don't know why they probably going to get shit for saying that, but the BC feds seem to push a lot when it comes to hunter opportunity, right? And why did they change it back? If it was such a bad idea, why did they change it back?
Yeah. What have you seen? I want to be careful with how I frame this. Do you think those 5 days make a significant impact on access to some of these rams?
For sure.
Yeah.
If not the last 10 days, especially up the valley, like everybody knows, that it's not an uncommon thing that weather pushes sheep all the places, right? Yep. And this might be a different year, especially here, because we don't really have any snow in the backcountry here. Maybe the valley does, maybe other places do, but on a typical year where they get that snow early October, man, them sheep funnel out because they know it's time to go. So a lot of them sheep get killed because of that reason, just because of their natural instincts, right? And it's no different here. When we get the early weather, some of them sheep funnel out, they got to come out, right? And them sheep get killed. So then I think, the last 5 days, 7 days, and it's the same for the first 5-7 days, right? Because people put in the time in the summer to find a legal ram. If they can't come on opening day, it's usually within the next couple of days. And when I was part of the bighorn sheep study 3 years ago, the first one that they did, they showed, they broke it down to the first 10 days, so many sheep got shot, and basically nothing for the middle of the season. And then the last 10 days, boom, it did happen again, right? But that's the same thing, right? If there's only so many legal rams on horn curl, it doesn't matter if the season's 60 days or not, or 100 days. If there's only 2 legal rams in that mountain, that's all you're going to shoot.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we talk about that above all, is while we're talking about options and LEH and limiting hunters, is hunter harvest any sort of a reason for a decline. And I think there's multiple things ahead of hunter harvest that is causing these declines in sheep. So, as hunters, Dylan talked about it, we're always the first ones that are willing to give up a little bit if it means the better of this species. 100%. But I think it's also important that we do make it known to the ministry and we do stand up for hunters' rights and say, listen, we're willing to give up if we're going to see some sort of positive effect. And if hunter harvest is a problem, then we are going to be the first people to address it. But is that the problem in this situation, or is this being used as a scapegoat for other problems potentially, right? Like when I see that number of the average age of rams being harvested in Region 4, I don't see any sort of issue with that personally, right? Over 8 years old, those rams are reaching their sexual maturity. They're just getting ready to pass their breeding age, or pretty close to it. I would think probably most rams that are breeding are between 6 and 8 years old. And once they're reaching 9, 10, or 11, they're kind of past that. I mean, I'm not overly familiar with that area. What do you think?
I agree with you too. That once they hit that 10 years old, it's pretty much done, right? Exactly. Where I spend time, I see 9-year-old rams that don't even bother coming down to the ewes anymore. It's the 6 and 7, some 5, 6-year-old rams sometimes that are breeding ewes when I go and hang out there and watch them in in November, not September. I know when I worked at the mine up at Elkview, there was a band of sheep that were always at the shop, and there was 5 or 6 rams, and none of them were big rams. They were anywhere from 2 to 5 years old, and those rams would breed them ewes right there in the parking lot of the shop, right? So at 5 years old, that them rams are doing their job. They're still passing on genetics. Just because that ram's not 9 years old and you don't know how big he is, he's still genetically, you know what I mean? He's going to be that big.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Genetics.
Genetics don't change with age. I mean, genetics are their genetics, right? But like I said, going back to the fact that what those rams are being harvested at, I don't see any issue with that, because those rams, for the most part, are past their breeding age, right? So when we're talking about what us as hunters are going to give up or what we're willing to do for it, it's important to talk about that too, right? And push that back on the ministry and say, hey, we understand that there's issues. We see that these sheep numbers are coming down and we want to do what we can to help, but here's the facts too, right?
Yeah. I'd like to see the facts too. Like, where's the proof? Like, you can't tell me that you've done two, maybe 3 years of hard studying in Region 4 on these sheep, that you have all the answers now to turn everything down age. The state is leaps and bounds ahead of us when it comes to sheep conservation. Maybe it's time to take a page out of their book. I don't know. I will say, I stand with WSSPC on this one. If our sheep populations are dropping to the point that it requires drastic change, go for it, because I'd like to see my kids and their kids and your kids and whoever else's kids be able to hunt sheep. I don't want to see it end. So obviously conservation, and that needs to change, but drastically in such short period of time, is that the answer? No. I think more time and money, like WSSBAC is putting in money now when it comes to sheep, but 10 years ago, it just wasn't happening, where that's when we needed it. That's when we needed the money from WSSBC, the ministry 10 years ago before this, because this didn't happen overnight, Jeff. You know that, right? Like it didn't happen. It just didn't happen 2 years ago. This has been long time coming from predation, letting things go longer than we should. Mm-hmm. This is something that should have been taken care of a long time ago. And the ministry is to blame, because they're the ones that make the laws, the regulations, and the rules on harvests.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's not hunters.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that's important to note is sometimes we have a lot of good wildlife managers here in British Columbia. Yeah. I just think sometimes they really do get handcuffed by,
it's above them.
Right. So
I really enjoy talking to Pat Stent, Mike Bridger, all them boys. They're good at what they do.
Yeah.
They're young, they're eager, but like said, hands tied above them, right? It's not, they're not making the calls. They got a job just like I got a job to go to, just like you got a job to go to.
Yeah.
And they can only do what they're allowed to do.
Yeah. If my boss gave me unlimited dollars, I don't know what I'd be doing with it, but it's definitely not happening for the poor bios either. I mean, I saw it. I talked about it with Dylan, but I saw it firsthand this year and how tied their hands are when it comes to some of the funding and some of the stuff they don't get to do. But
like we were supposed to burn Bull Mountain at 422 2 years ago, and whatever happened with they couldn't get the people from the not search and rescue, but the BC fire to do it. Or if it was bad timing, or there was fires, or we couldn't burn because of all the noxious weeds. There just always seemed to be an issue of why they couldn't do it, and that burn still hasn't went. Unfortunately, the wrong end of that valley burnt this year, like all of the Wassa burn, which is phenomenal, man. That sheep herd needed that burn. The community's up in arms because the mountain's on fire, but what it's going to do for ungulates.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's always one of those things when you're seeing it in the summer, you're seeing all these wildfires going on, and it's unfortunate when places are being lost. But on the other hand, as conservationists and hunters, we think about the wildlife too, and it does have some positive effect for wildlife and ungulates, right?
Yeah.
Long term for sure. Let's touch on the other options that were kind of provided there, the 1 in 3, the 1 in 5. What do you think about that? I mean, it limits opportunity for hunting for those who are successful, but what do you think it does for actual harvest of some of those sheep? Like, what's your opinion?
Repeat that again quick.
So the two of the other options were limiting the amount of rams you could take within a certain time period.
Yeah.
So if you took a ram, you're waiting 3 years. If you took a ram, you're waiting 5 years. We've seen it done in BC before with thin horns. It was 1 in 3. Alberta has the 1 in 2 right now and has had that for as long back as I can remember. What do you think in terms of the effect on that? Like, do you see a positive effect from doing that? Do you see any sort of change from that? What's your opinion?
I'm kind of both ways, right? Like, you look, there's certain people in the sheep community that kill sheep every year, every 2 years, or every year, right? And those guys are good hunters. They're unreal sheep hunters, man. And they're not out there killing 6, 7, 5-year-old rams every year. They're killing big, mature rams that it's not hurting anything. Now, if you had guys consecutively going out and killing young sheep every year, okay, I get that. I get that part. You want to stop that, right? I think if you made the rule differently, like, okay, say I went out and I killed a ram that's 7 years old, or you can't hunt sheep for 2 years now. You kill a ram that's 6 years old, you get a 3-year waiting period. 5 years old, you got a 5-year waiting period now.
Yeah.
But that's more of a penalty just for shooting a young sheep than it is for restricting guys.
Yeah.
If I had to pick, I'd rather go 1 in 3 personally, not the 1 in 5. But I still think that there's other ways.
Yeah,
like we said, I would rather see it still GOS and then just put the work and the time and the money into what needs to be done. But if we're to the point where we have to pick, I answered that as 1 in 3 and separate sheep tags.
Yeah, that was going to be the last one I wanted to talk about. Kind of the idea of separate sheep tags. Whatever time of the year that decision needs to be made, whether it be, I'd say sometime in the spring, probably you got to make, or maybe late spring, just before summer, you got to make your decision. Are you going to hunt bighorns? Are you going to hunt stones? What are you hunting? Are you draw a doll tag and that's all you get for the year? Like, what's your opinion on that? Separating those thin horns and bighorns, and from what I understood, the option was going to be that you can hold a bighorn tag or you can hold a thin horn tag, and you can't hold both.
Yeah, I think if they're going to do the 2 separate tags, it's got to be thin horn, bighorn. That way, if you do draw a doll sheep, it's still considered a thin horn, right? So if you draw a doll sheep and you don't kill a doll sheep, well, you can still go north and kill a stone, right? Because it is thin horn still. It's not. It'd be no different if they said, well, now we're going to make you buy a Cali tag. We're going to make you buy a bighorn tag. I think they got to keep it as the book says. It's either a thin horn or it's a bighorn.
Yes.
In the real world, I just had this chat with Nick Millick like an hour ago. He just phoned me. We were talking about it, and I said, dude, like, man, I don't work in a spot where I could take 8 weeks vacation off. So in the spring, for me to be like, yo, I'm hunting thinhorns this year. Well, I'm probably not, because I could probably dedicate 7 to 10 days from work to go up there, but that's it. I can't make 5 trips.
Yeah.
But I can hunt bighorns here all fall.
Yes.
So some people can do that, but not everybody can. So you're restricting some hunters, but it's not about that. I don't know, man. It's like I said, it's the lesser of two evils. That's the shitty thing.
Yeah.
Like I think I would rather see a 1 and 3 rule than the different sheep tags, because there's going to be guys that just can't do one or the other.
Yeah. No, I agree.
You might end up putting more pressure on bighorns than you normally would, because there's guys that go up and kill stones every year. Every year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That it could be one of the effects is you're going to see further pressure on one or the other.
And I can say, we're going to go back to the LEH. I can say personally, and I know if anybody else that listens to this, it's from Region 4 that hunts, when they put 422 on LEH, there's a lot of big time sheep hunters and good sheep hunters that only hunted 422. Me myself was one of them. And there's a bunch of us that were super successful. We killed a bunch of rams in there, but now you can't hunt there unless you draw that tag. So we're dispersing now. You can ask Dylan, how many guys from here go up the valley now? How many guys go to Canal Flats or go up, that neck of the woods up there? I see it personally that spot gets loaded now the last 3 years because there's nowhere else to hunt.
Yeah.
So maybe there, because the pressure was lower, maybe, a legal ram or two would get to live. Not now. It's a foot race over there in some of them open spots now. Now, if they make all a Region 4 LEH, sheep hunters are going to hunt sheep. They're not going to stop. They're just going to travel. So you're going to take everybody from here and they're going to go your way, or they're going to go north, or they're going to go anywhere else that it's general open season, right? It's almost discriminatory is what it's going on.
Are you trying to tell me I got to make an extra bed in my trailer for you?
Yeah. No, that's the same thing, man. I got 10 days. That's it. That's all I get.
I'm just bugging you. But yeah, you're 100% right. And like I've said it multiple times already here. I've said it with Dylan, and Dylan said it a couple of times. We're talking about all these restrictions, but I don't always know if restrictions are the best, especially restrictions on hunting. I don't know if they're the answer to our problems. I think that there's a lot of other things that need to be looked at before they limit hunter opportunity. And I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but
I don't know. Hunter opportunity. I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't seem to really work. It works for the hunters, but it doesn't seem to work for everything else. I think like back in the look at Alberta right now with their cat season. This is just kind of I'm brainstorming right now. Alberta's cat season. They're on a quota, but they're on a call-in quota. So basically, if one zone has 3 females and 3 toms, lots of their areas are shut down by Christmas, man. They're done, right? And a lot of it is because there's outfitters that will reduce the price of their cougar hunts, bring in they'll bring in resident cougar hunters. They'll kill these cats. Season gets shut down. Resident hunters are done. They got no pursuit season, right? It happens all the time. Everybody knows that. That's just how Alberta works. Why can't they do? Our outfitters in BC are already restricted. 1 and 3 rule or whatever, however many tags are allowed in a year, right? They need to set a number. I'm going to use 422 as an example because it's LEH. If they want 3 bighorn sheep killed out of 422A and they want 2 bighorn sheep killed out of 422B, there ain't nowhere in any of them ranges that you cannot be out in 24 hours. Why can't they say, okay, after 3 rams are done, killed, it's over. Shut down. If there's 3 rams in 422A killed September 15th, she's shut down. But no LEH, it's JOS. Yeah. It still gives everybody the opportunity to hunt sheep. You have to phone it in. You kill a ram, you phone it in. I killed it here. Notch.
It's interesting.
Once that ram is killed, that 3rd ram's killed, you have that 24-hour window. right? Chances are another ram's not going to get killed. But if it does next year, guess what, guys? It's
one less. Yeah.
Right?
And I think, don't quote me on it, I'm going to strictly try and search this, but I'm pretty sure that's how the unlimited tag or the unlimiteds in Montana work as well. Is it's a set number of, it's a quota, it's a set number. When X amount of sheep are taken, they shut it down.
Yeah.
Right. So
then you eliminate over harvest. You eliminate 2 months worth of local pressure. Maybe you might get it. It might be one of them years where nobody can find a legal ram, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, like I said, be the devil's advocate where you're still keeping sheep hunters sheep hunting, but yet you're still managing the amount of sheep that get killed. And then, like you said, you can still do it. Like, hey, you killed a 5-year-old ram this year. Guess what, man? You're done for 3 years, 5 years, or however many years they want to pick.
Yep.
There's lots of ways to do it. I feel like they haven't really explored every option. I think it was just, we got to go LEH. Boom. It's easy to manage. It's a leverage tool. It's easy for us to do.
It's the easiest option, in my opinion.
For them, it is. Yes.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. For them, it's the easiest option. When we talk about what we're talking about now and say a limited quota for even residents on a GOS, well, in order to manage that, it takes time and it takes a position and it takes someone who has the ability to shut it down when that quota gets hit. So that requires government funding. Yeah. And that's where we all know BC is lacking, is that government funding, right? So it makes it that much more difficult. I like the idea, but we need participation and buy-in on something like that from the government and the ministry as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I had. And then any other thoughts that you got? Like I said, this is going to be a couple-part episode with a couple different people's jumping in on it and buy-in. And I wanted to get guys that I know have spent a lot of time out there and been out in that area and are, informed on those sheep populations and have spent time with them to give some of their opinions. And that's why I reached out to you. So if you got any other closing thoughts, closing option, or, anything you want to say on it.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like the ministry just needs to sit back and really evaluate before they have a habit, especially in Region 4, of being super reactive instead of proactive. Oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. If sheep tags in BC, $60, man, that's cheap. Anybody can do that. If they up the price of a sheep tag to say, I'm going to go high, $300. Are you buying a sheep tag?
Oh yeah.
I'm buying a sheep tag, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to weed sheep hunters and then non-sheep hunters? Do you know what I mean? Our LEH, I put in for sheep in the States. I mean, it costs me a lot of money every year. Or do I find that our LEH is really underpriced? 100% it is. I feel like it's really underpriced. If our LEH tags were $15, people will probably still put in. But if you make things a little bit more money, and unfortunately, I don't want to sound like the whole hunting's for the rich people. But I think this is a way to keep sheep hunters sheep hunting. Is because the sheep hunters are going to put that money back into it. They always do it. Every banquet, every WSF, every WSSPC, every Wild Sheep Foundation of Alberta, it's no different. Sheep hunters are putting the money into it, right? And they always will. So it's time that sheep hunters got rewarded for the opportunities. Chances are, unless you're smoking lucky like some guys that I know, I'll probably never draw a sheep tag. I've been put in for Salmo and shoe laps my whole life, and I've never drawn. I can't see myself drawing. Maybe I will. So if they go to LEH, just can't. I probably won't sheep hunt again, which sucks because I love sheep hunting.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because here's something I want your opinion on. Last week, Matt and I were out bighorn hunting for the last bit of the season. We see a ram get taken, right? Doesn't meet what a GOS requirement would be. Me and him both look at this ram through the spotter. Clearly doesn't meet that. You see the group of individuals come over to the ram. They're celebrating, they're taking their pictures, yada, yada, yada. We put the spotter on it. It's a 3 or 4 year old 3/4 ram. We get out of reception. We do our due diligence. We make a call to the local CEO who oversees everything. Blah, blah, blah. He asks us a few questions. He recognizes the group as a group he checked 2 days before, and they had the LEH, right?
Yeah.
So let's just go back a little bit to what we were talking about on average age harvest of rams and Kootenays at just over 8 years old. Let's say that everything goes to LEH, right? We're going to have everybody putting in for those LEHs at $6 a pop, right? You're going to have your sheep hunters and you're going to have your non-sheep hunters putting in for these tags. And in my opinion, and I don't know what your opinion is going to be on it, but I feel like we're going to see a lot more of those people that just because it's only $6 put in their sheep tag. They're the ones that are drawing these tags. And we're going to see that average age of harvest drop with an LEH. That's my opinion.
I think that's what's going to happen. I could be wrong, but I think that is what's going to happen unless you have somebody there guiding you the way if you're not a sheep hunter.
Uh-huh.
And around here, there's just so many sheep hunters around here that I don't know, it might not do that, but there might be a few cases where it is. But I agree with you. I think that that's what's going to happen. Like, I think if they were to do, even if they do decide to go LEH, drop the whole horn restriction and just go straight age rule. You have to keep that age class up. If you don't keep it up, then obviously you're going to kill off your breeding rams and then you're going to have breeding issues. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So, as long as that age class is still high, then obviously them ewes are still getting bred.
Yep.
If those lambs are making it, your sheep population should be growing. If your sheep population isn't growing, why?
Yep.
It's not because the 30 bands of rams, or the band of 30 rams that are dispersed are dying. It could be. But if you don't have, 30%? You need 30% recruitment from lambs to calves to, right?
Yep.
Ish, 30% ish.
Right around there, yeah.
Hopefully I'm right. If I'm not, I hope somebody corrects me. But if it's 30%, what are we seeing? 15? Your population's never going to grow. Ever. It'll never grow. So different than elk, mule deer. Bears, if you don't have that recruitment of fawns, calves, whatever it is, you're not going to have a growth in population.
Yes.
Right? And like, it's the simple, it's no different than goats, right? Like, thankfully we're not killing ewes and lambs. It's no different than goats. Like, how is shooting a nanny even legal in BC? Get rid of it. We know. Does your local farmer go out and shoot his breeding cows? No, he does that for a reason.
I'm going to roll you back in here, Kyle. We're talking about Region 4 bighorns. We'll be on here for 2 hours. We start talking about that.
But you get where I'm coming from this.
I know exactly. Yeah, I think
if you don't have recruitment, you don't have growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like I said, it all falls back to the whole mismanagement of that. It falls back to thankfully, Ariana and everybody else in Region 4 that have been doing the restoration and the work in 422, I think it's huge because that line of sight work does. Some people disagree because they tunnel vision, right? They don't see it the way that most people do. If they don't open up that line of sight, then sheep have a hard time. They're dumb. They have a hard time getting away from predators, but at least they have that line of sight of 100 yards. They can run like the wind for 100 yards and they might not get taken down by a cat or a wolf. But if they don't have that line of sight, they have to, 5 feet this way, 5 feet that way, they're going to get killed. So that line of sight work definitely proves itself to work for predation. And obviously it takes out some of that underbrush and creates better habitat for them to eat, wintering range, blah, 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 right? So just blame one thing, it ain't going to work. It's other things, but those are the top two things in Region 4 that they got to take care of it before they even think of changing seasons, because it's not going to change.
Let's wrap it up there. I've had a good chat. I'm definitely going to get you back onto here down the road anyway, too. So have some more of these discussions. Might pump a little more whiskey into you next time or something, though.
Yeah.
Or we'll do it in a tent with Matt in between us.
I don't think there'll be much talking.
All right, Kyle. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks, eh?
Thanks for tuning in to Tent Talk. Let us know your thoughts and opinions on some of today's discussion online on Instagram at Wilderness Locals or Jeff Agostinho.